after going through YC, that's when we raised our seed round, and that kind of kicked off everything for us. We were able to then move to China, start actual manufacturing, right, and everything that came thereafter.
Right. So you guys raised, if I remember correctly, like a total of close to over $70 million. Is that right? My name is Kevin David, and if you want real financial freedom for yourselves and for your loved ones today, then the time is now. And I will be there to help you every step of the way. What is up, guys, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Kevin David Experience, your favorite podcast or soon to be favorite podcast. Today we have a very special guest, but a big shout out to everybody who's been leaving us reviews on iTunes and Spotify, and people who are checking out the podcast on YouTube, because it's now officially on YouTube. So today we have Alexandra Zatarain, who's joining us from Miami, where I live as well. She's been Forbes 30 Under 30, founded a really exciting company. And so we're going to be talking about all of that. But Alexandra, the first question that we ask everyone on the podcast is to describe your entrepreneurial journey all the way up until right now in 60 seconds or less.
Started 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago. So it's been a journey. This is my first company. And all I can say is it's been a blast, a lot of ups and downs. My company focuses on sleep. So I've gotten to experience this area of our health and well-being very in depth, and to build products that can help people sleep better, which is fantastic. So I'm lucky to be where I am today.
And so was this like a personal problem that that created this idea, or like how did the idea come about?
So yeah, I actually have the company with two other co-founders, and one of them is Matteo, my husband, and he's our CEO. And he's the one that started with the problem. So many years ago, way before 8 Sleep, he started struggling with his sleep. You know, he's the person where he was a former athlete when he was young, and then he became a lawyer, and then he became an entrepreneur. So like many of us, right? High performer, person who's kind of putting their health and their well-being to the side for the sake of productivity and success. And then he started struggling. And he just started thinking, well, what are some of the things in the market that can help me sleep better? Who's building products that will actually improve my sleep? And this was many years ago, where there were wearables, there were the Fitbits, there were just Jawbone. This was pre-Apple Watch and anything like that. So that's how the idea came about, is why don't we do something with modern technology that is seamless and that is built and designed for sleep improvement specifically.
So I listened to Tim Ferriss, or I guess I did back in the day. And I remember him mentioning, he has like a question he asked people on his podcast, like what's the best like purchase of under $100 or something like that. And one time somebody said something called a chili pad. I assume you've heard of that. Is that similar to 8 Sleep, or is that completely different? Am I off base or what?
Yeah, we can talk about that. By the way, Tim sleeps on our product.
I love that.
Sleeping on our product now. It's been close to probably a year now. So yeah, he loves it. So if you listen to his more recent episodes, you'll hear him talk about it. So it is similar in the sense that there's a feature that we share, right? So the foundation of a product like 8 Sleep right now, which we always say we're at 10% of our product vision, is to use temperature regulation to improve sleep. So there are other products in the market that obviously adopt something similar. And the reason is there is a science that talks about the importance of sleep, especially sleeping cooler to sleep better. Now, what makes us different from anything in the market first is the fact that we're a mission-driven company, which I always love to talk about, because I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there who are really building companies that are mission first versus product first. And we are mission first. We want to fuel human potential through optimal sleep. And whatever we have to do to get there, we're going to do it. We're not married to just a feature or a product. And so for us, the pod, which is our best-selling product right now, the one we're best known for, is using temperature regulation in real time, which is something no other product does. So using the data that we get from the sensors and in real time adjusting the temperature to keep you always comfortable. But then that doesn't mean that that's where we're going to stay. We're already working on other products, because we know that for you to sleep well, you need to do more than just temperature regulation. Even though that's the number one problem, there's many other things that are going to get in the way of a good night's sleep.
Right. So what are some like myths or things that people that may not, know as much about sleep and the importance, like what are some things that people should know about how to, have more energy through the day, or feel more well rested, or what are some things that you think people, listening to the podcast would benefit from?
The first myth that I think people, especially adults, start believing is that you can be bad at sleeping. Like, I'm a bad sleeper. And you assign that identity to yourself, and then you convince yourself that you're just a bad sleeper. And so that's why I only get 4 hours of sleep, or that's why I get such restless sleep. There's no such thing as just like genetically being a bad sleeper for most of us, right? There will be a subset of people who will actually have conditions and medical conditions where they need to take care of. Most of us are just not getting into the practice of sleep fitness properly. There is such a thing as becoming sleep fit, just like you could do with your physical fitness, with your mental fitness, with your financial fitness, right? You can get good at it. You just have to put in the effort. You have to measure it. You have to optimize it. You have to actually practice it every single day to get good at sleep. So that's one thing I'd say for everyone out there. Don't get discouraged. There are things that you can learn. And there are things that you could do with technology, and there are things that you can also do without it. Like, we're also here to talk about not just our products, but how do you embrace sleep fitness in your everyday life? And my favorite tip for anyone out there, start with consistency.
Right.
Most people will sleep very bad during the weekdays and then try to recover on the weekends. And that's not really something you can do. Your body is not designed that way. Your sleep debt is going to basically reset every 3 days or so. So if you are incurring into sleep debt on Monday night, you can't make up for that on Saturday. So it's important that you maintain a consistent schedule. In my case, for instance, I go to bed 9:30 to 10 p.m. every single day, including weekends. And there will be some exceptions, of course, like sometimes you may be out, but I won't go to bed at 1 a.m. Like maybe I'll go to bed at the latest at 11. But okay, that's me. I'm obviously an entrepreneur in sleep. I'm very obsessed by it, but it has made a big difference. So to the extent that you can do it, you should really try to build that consistent schedule, just like you would do with a kid or a baby. You would keep them in a schedule. You need to do for yourself. That's going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, I remember reading about Jordan Peterson's like 12 steps for whatever life. I forget what the name of his book is, but one of the things he says is just by going to sleep at the same time and waking up at the same time every morning, you can actually have a clinical level of reduction of anxiety. And I remember like reading about like the studies and things that he like was listing with that. What's your opinion on like the optimal, and I know there's probably no perfect answer, but I'm sure people wonder this. What's the optimal number of hours to sleep, and like what's the importance of a circadian rhythm if there is one?
Yeah, there definitely is one. And the most basic way to think about it is just think about light exposure. When you think about your circadian rhythm, just think about when the sun is setting in the evening and when the sun is rising in the morning, and the fact that we are so connected to nature. That's why animals go to sleep or hide when the sun goes down, and then they'll like go out of their little caves in the morning. It's very similar to us as humans. So light exposure is super key to your circadian rhythm, and so being active during that daylight is optimal for us. And so when you follow that, then you can start thinking about the moments when there is no sunlight, and you'd want to be getting between 7 and 9 hours every night, but everyone is different. Now, one of the most interesting things that we talk about at 8 Sleep, and Matteo, my co-founder, is a huge advocate of, is this idea of compressing sleep. For the most part, what we know about optimal sleep for humans today has been only studied on few people at a time, and has been done in ways that are not super easy to replicate. So it's either taking people out of their environments and putting them to sleep clinics, or having people in their homes and having them journal. Maybe now in more modern times, starting to use some sort of sleep tracking technology to measure this. But even then, it's not representative of all of us and like the entire diversity of the population of the earth. And so if you're only studying sleep on a subset of people that look a certain way, have certain genetics, how can you use those results to then guide the rest of the world as to how they should be sleeping, right? If you sleep in places in the world where maybe there's more daylight, the days are longer, or there is less, your sleep should probably look different, right? So we always talk about this idea of the 7 to 9 hours that we know today. Eventually, with technologies like what we do at 8 Sleep, and the fact that they're so distributed and they're tracking data every single day for long periods of time, we may discover what is actually your ideal 8, right? While most people are targeting the 8 hours of sleep, we may discover in 2 to 3 years what's your blueprint. What do you actually need? And that needs to go beyond just what you qualitatively think is good for you, and actually start measuring quantitatively the impact that those hours of sleep are having in your health and longevity, which is what most of us are not really able to see right now.
Yeah. So last question on sleep, and then we'll get more into the business of 8 Sleep. But like, so I've heard conflicting opinions about this, and I just want to get your opinion on it. Do you think that some people are like intrinsically or like born either morning people or night people? Because I've seen, studies saying that some people just naturally are more so like night owls, and some people are naturally more so morning people. Do you think that that's true, or it's a learned skill, or what's your opinion about that?
There are some genetics connected to that, just like there are some genetic factors for people who are actually able to thrive on less than 6 hours of sleep. It's a really small percentage of the population. So yeah, there is some inclination, some tendency. You can adjust it. You can change it, because if you go to live in a place where the sun is setting later, right? Like all of these things are going to impact your ability to fall asleep earlier versus later in the day. So all of this around sleep, for the most part, are things that you can train yourself to change.
Right. Right. Yeah. So let's talk about the actual business of 8 Sleep. So you guys, you started how long ago?
We launched our first product in 2015.
In 2015, so six-ish years. So when
Yep.
you guys first did that, like, what was that process like? Like, did you have to go find a manufacturer? Were you making it here or overseas? Like, what was the prototype process like? How many units did you order? Like, can you talk about that initial process for people who are thinking about starting their own business?
Sure. I think we were really naive, because when we started the company, none of us as founders had built a hardware product. We have an actual physical product with sensors and all the temperature regulating technology. So we thought, should be easy. We'll figure it out. Maybe we'll hire some people that will help us out. And
Yeah.
initially what we did, because we didn't have that experience with manufacturing a product, is we launched the first product in crowdfunding. Back in 2015, crowdfunding was pretty big, especially for hardware products. So we went that route, and it worked really well. Within less than 2 months, I believe it was over $1.2 million directly in the crowdfunding campaign, and some other sales that we made directly on our website. So that was around 6,000 or 8,000 units. I'm blanking what was the amount, but it was a lot. It was a lot of products that people pre-ordered, and now we had to figure out a way to manufacture it. So from that point to actually shipping the product, it took us a while. So it probably took us close to a year, because we had to figure out the process. So, thankfully we had done it in a platform where people had bought into supporting a company and a set of founders that were figuring things out. And that's what those platforms are built for, which was great. But from then we had to prototype. We obviously had an initial prototype, and we understood how the technology would work. But it was 3 or 4 units. It was us as founders using it. But from then on, we had to actually do beta units. We had to give them out to people. We had to test every aspect of it. Then we moved to China. Some of us, I stayed back in New York City, where we were based at the time. And my co-founders moved to China to figure out all of the manufacturing, hire a local team. So it was an entire process. It was completely new to us. It was fascinating. And now that's still what we do today. So all of the product development, the research happens here in the US. This is where we have our team. And then we have a small team in China that's actually doing the manufacture with a bunch of different suppliers. And then another part of the product that's manufactured in the US when you buy the full pod mattress. And then it all comes to life here, which the US and Canada are the only markets where we sell our product right now.
Yeah. So knowing what you know now, after kind of doing that process, as you called it, not being naive, like, what would you have done differently? Like, if you were going to restart knowing everything that you know now, like, what's kind of like the very minutia, step by step, like, order of things that you would do?
It's hard, looking back, because obviously whatever we did got us to where we are today.
Of
But
course.
whenever you don't know something, which was the case for us back then, where we didn't know manufacturing, we could have probably learned from other people sooner. And that's tricky, because then you need to be able to identify who are the right people to learn from. And I think we made some mistakes initially learning from people who were not the perfect fit, the most adequate people to teach us about really, really early stage, like startup, new product development, versus learning from people who maybe come from bigger companies, and their experience is completely different. So can you find those sorts of mentors or advisors, or just people who are willing to talk to you, who have gone through something resembling what you're about to go through, and can you just have those conversations earlier on? And we did that a lot early on with, for instance, marketing. We talked to a lot of people who have launched successful crowdfunding campaigns. We learned a lot, and I think that's part of what made us successful when we launched. Instead, we kind of neglected the other aspects. Usually you tend to push back when you don't know about something, right? You tend to procrastinate, and you'll deal with it later. And I think that hurt us a little bit.
Yeah, but at the same time, right? I mean, looking back, it's like everything happened for a reason, and you're where you are where you are now because you took action and you kind of figured out the things you didn't figure out. But finding people who can help you, sooner, is definitely always key. Where would you look if you didn't have, a big network? Like, what would your thought process be to kind of find those mentors, like regardless of what your niche is?
Yeah, that was a challenge for us because we did not have that network. My co-founders had companies before in very different spaces. And, none of us grew up in the US. None of us had like the sort of like, oh, we went to Stanford and we went to all, we moved to Silicon Valley, we moved to San Francisco for the first year of the company. We were trying to break into, we were trying to make relationships, but we didn't really know immediately the right people in the hardware space.
Right.
And that was the challenge. So honestly, which I think most entrepreneurs do already, is like you just have to reach out to anyone possible. Just, find them on LinkedIn, go to any event where you feel like there will be a community of people, talk to them. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And even if you ask 100 people and one tells you yes and spends 30 minutes with you, that's going to be so valuable. I see a lot of that now happen to me. There'll be a lot of founders who will reach out with questions. And one thing I have to say is you also have to make it easy for people to help you. Don't ask them for a phone call. Ask them 2 questions by email. Everyone in the world is busy, no matter what they do for their job. So just also make it easy. Don't expect too much from the person who's going to help you. Make it super easy so that you get the questions you need answered as easily as possible by them.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. So you guys have raised a relatively substantial amount of venture capital. Is that right? So,
Yeah.
so you guys started with like crowdfunding, like Kickstarter or something like that. And then at what point did you decide to raise venture? What was that process and timeline kind of like?
We always knew we were going to need venture money because of the type of business we're building, right? You're manufacturing, you're developing products and all that innovation, then you're manufacturing up front. So it is more of a capital intensive business. So I always say, if you don't need it, you don't have to. Raising venture it doesn't make your business more successful or better than someone that doesn't have it. We knew we needed it. So what happened is after our crowdfunding campaign, we went through Y Combinator. That was the third time we applied to YC. We finally got in, so it took us a while. We had the success of the crowdfunding, which helped us validate that we were onto something. And so obviously after going through YC, that's when we raised our seed round, and that kind of kicked off everything for us. We were able to then move to China, start actual manufacturing, right, and everything that came thereafter.
Right. So you guys raised, if I remember correctly, like a total of close to over $70 million.
Yeah,
Is that right?
correct.
Okay. So like if you had to say, okay, of that $70 million, like let's say that's out of every 100 you spent, like what would you say that was actually allocated to? Like 30% to marketing, 40% to hardware, like what would you say that the money actually went?
You almost have to think about it as how you would think about margins and kind of cost distribution when you buy any product out there. More or less,
Right.
you're paying, 30% for the product, 30% for marketing, 30% for like company's margins. Obviously, we are not a profitable company yet. And so, yeah, more or less the allocation, it's mostly towards acquiring customers, right? So that's sort of 30% is where we like to keep it. And there's the operation side of it. So you need to hire, you need to have a team, et cetera. And then the rest, the bulk of it is you have to manufacture the products. There's the cost of goods. In our case, we're not a software business. And there is the research and development. So that is the biggest bucket for us. There has to be research for new innovation, and there has to be the actual manufacturing of these products.
Right. Do you ever, this is kind of a strange question, but do you ever regret raising venture? Like, because, some people have such different experiences. Like sometimes with the perfect venture partners, like it's amazing. They introduce you to the right people, you get connections, you get new employees, things like that. And then sometimes it just kind of seems like people lose control and they feel like they have a boss. Like, what's been your overall experience with it, if you can be honest?
Yeah. Honestly, I'm always very honest with these questions. That's why I always say, if you don't need the money, don't race it. Like,
Yeah.
people treat it as a little bit of that vanity metric of like, oh, it makes you cool. No, if you don't need it, if you have a profitable business, that's amazing. I admire a lot of founders who are able to do that. In our case, I think we've been very, very lucky to be able to bring on board the investors that we have, particularly the people that have led our previous 2 rounds who are on our board, right? We have Khosla Ventures and Founders Fund. They're absolutely amazing funds to work with, and their teams and the investors seen on our board. They're people who are very supportive. At the same time, they challenge you. They want you to be better. Want you to think better. They want to elevate how you're approaching the problems. Like, I think that is what is important. If you are going to work with investors, there's always this saying amongst founders in the valley of like the dumb money versus the smart money. Just seek smart money as much as you can. And early on, sometimes it's hard because you need the money. And so you maybe will take anyone you can. But as you start giving up bigger control of your company, as you start actually doing priced rounds and you start giving up board seats, you want to think about who you're going to be having those conversations with. And they won't always have your back, right? It is a business. And if you are not the right person to be in that position, you also need to put your ego aside and think who is. You are, at the end of the day, owner of your company. You want it to succeed, or you should want it to succeed above your own personal outcome. But you want to be with people who most importantly believe in your mission and want to take the company in the same direction. Whether you're in it or not, for us, the company fulfilling its mission is more important than anything else.
Right. I love that. And so for people, the last question I'll ask, and then we'll get into the little rapid fire round, which is, little short questions to end the podcast. So, people that hear like Khosla Ventures and Founders Fund or like Sequoia or kind of like the best of the best, like how did you get them interested? How did you get them to actually invest? Like for people who are listening, was that as a result of Y Combinator, or was it through relationships? Like how would you advise people listening if they really want to get the attention of these like top tier guys and girls? What would be the way that you would go about that?
Yeah, we have great, amazing stories for that. But for us, it all started with trying to court Keith Raboy to join our company as an investor because we knew that he was obsessed with sleep. So we met with him back in, I think, maybe our YC days or right after, when they start pairing you with investors, just to kind of, practice your pitch, get some feedback. And he wasn't very much into our pitch or how we were describing the company, but we did know that he was obsessed with sleep. And he was one of those few, probably the only investor we had heard of talk about sleep being important, the fact that he was measuring his sleep and whatnot. So I know Matteo, my co-founder, and he's our CEO, so he's the one that does all the fundraising, had been courting him for so long and trying to get anyone who knew him, who knew us, to talk to him about what we were doing. And eventually someone reconnected them when we were maybe a few months after our first interaction. So maybe we had matured a little bit. We had processed some of the feedback, not only from him, from a lot of other investors. We had raised some money in our seed round right after YC. And what we decided to do, and I still remember that, Matteo and I, who, like I said, were married. So we were sitting in our apartment in New York City, and we decided, instead of sending him just a deck, that we were going to put together Matteo's vision for what 8 Sleep was going to become into a memo. And this was probably back in 2016 or 2017. And I think that was one of those pivotal moments for us. We spent the entire weekend working on it. It just put the whole vision of where technology was going to take sleep, what the future was going to be. And it's a 2-page memo that we still use at the company. That's still the foundation of where we are going. And that is probably what ended up convincing him that what we were doing was much more than where we were at that moment in time. So if you have that sort of company with a very ambitious view of the future, you have the clarity, right, and the ability to just distill it into a short memo, that is going to stand out. There's a lot of entrepreneurs, and we were definitely there at the beginning, where you're still trying to find direction. And the best investors want to work with founders that have the conviction and the clarity of where they are going to go. So if you can prove that, they may agree or disagree with it, but for sure you're going to stand out from a lot of the other pitches that they receive. And so then from then on, that led to our Series B with Khosla, and then Keith eventually moved to Founders Fund, and the company was doing really well, so we were able to work with them again.
I love that. So last question, and then we'll get into the rapid fire round. What is 8 Sleep's mission, like in a sentence?
Yeah, so our mission per se is to fuel human potential through optimal sleep. We specifically believe that to achieve optimal sleep, we have to use technology, and technology can do a few things for us. One, track seamlessly how you're sleeping and how your health is doing while you're sleeping. That is very key, because you cannot improve what you don't measure. Second, create the optimal environment for sleep in real time. Because we have that data, we know how you sleep as an individual. We can actually create all the environment around you to make sure that nothing gets in the way of a good night's sleep. And that means both helping you build the right habits and guiding you as your habits will change, but also taking control of the environment, temperature, light, noise, oxygen, many other things. And so the end result of that will be better nights of sleep. And eventually, who knows, you may be sleeping less hours and getting just as much recovery as when you were getting 8.
I love it. I'm sold. And I literally guarantee that like the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who eventually listen to this are going to go check out 8 Sleep after hearing that mission. So last part of the podcast is our rapid fire session. So these questions and answers are supposed to be like 30-second answers or less.
Okay.
And so the first one is, what is the one book or mindset lesson that most greatly influenced your life?
I love the idea that the score will take care of itself. You know, that there's the famous book with the same title, where if you set up the right process, if you teach people how you want to approach things, if you focus on that, then the results will come. We have seen that happen many times at 8 Sleep, and that's the one book I recommend anyone in our team who eventually starts managing someone to just think about that. If you do things right from bottoms up, then the results will come.
And what was the name of the book?
The Score Takes Care of Itself.
The Score Takes Care of Itself. Got it. All right, cool. The next one is, if you could teach everyone in the world one concept, what concept would you teach them?
Oh, that's really hard. I don't want to say something about sleep, so I'll probably talk about my other favorite topic, which is brand. Just the idea of what brand actually stands for. It's about your promise and what the other person believes you stand for. Just remember that. It's not about how you look. It's not a logo. That's not a brand. What does the other person who has an interaction with you believe that you stand for?
Got it. I love it. This one might be an easy question for you too, because it could be related to sleep. But if you had to choose one habit that all or the largest percentage of successful people share, what habit would that be?
Definitely sleep right now is becoming more of a trend. People are optimizing their sleep. And the second is physical activity. That is a pattern that you see. Most people who are extremely successful make time to stay healthy and use physical fitness as a way to also stay clear of mind and healthy.
Love it. Next one is, if you could have dinner with one person, dead or alive, who would it be? And what's the number one thing that you would ask them?
100% it would be Oprah Winfrey. When I was growing up and I was watching American television back in my room in Tijuana, Mexico, Oprah was such an inspiration to me. Seeing a woman of color doing what she was doing and becoming a media mogul, I would probably ask her, what does she do to get her best ideas? I'm a huge fan of kind of thinking about how to become an idea machine. How do you get into your flow state and your Zen state? I would love to know what she does.
I love that. Yeah. And no one's ever said Oprah, so that's a really interesting answer. I love that. And she's an obvious one too. What is a unique or uncommon hobby that you love doing, and why?
Oh, I love sitting down and doing my own nails, like doing my nail polish. I haven't been to a salon in many, many years. It's actually this practice, it's almost meditative to me. So yeah. I do that every couple of weeks, and it's pretty relaxing.
I love it. All right, last 2 questions. When you're feeling overwhelmed or in a rut or just not knowing where to start, what specifically do you do to get out of it?
There will be 2 things. One is that I talk to Mateo, who's my co-founder, who's also my husband. I find that we've built that interaction where we help bring clarity to each other with their own problems and work out. I'm not a very, athletic person in the sense that I don't love working out. I do it for my health, but I find it to be a tremendous source of clarity where it just flushes all of my thoughts out, and then something bright comes in front of me, and that's when I get great ideas.
I love it. And last question, if you had a time machine, but you only had enough time to tell your 18-year-old self one thing, what would you tell her? Learn
how to code. I wish I did that when I was 18.
I love it. Awesome. So amazing podcast. You're such a natural at this. It's like, I'm sure people are going to love it, and this is going to be a really popular one. The last thing is, if people want to learn more about you or reach out to you with, 2 question specific emails or learn more about 8 Sleep, what's the best way to do that?
Ping me on Twitter. That's the best way. You
Cool.
find me easily there. So yeah, find me on Twitter. I'm always happy to connect there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and we really appreciate you. We'll link your Twitter in all of the different areas that the podcast is launched, and I look forward to watching you guys continue to crush it and getting my 8 Sleep for my own bed.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alex.